Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem, and in today's top stories. Israel indicates cautious optimism over progress made in advancing an outline to see the hostages returned home. Jerusalem stands united in its position as the Israeli legislature adopts a resolution rejecting unilateral international diktats over the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The United States argues that the International Court of Justice has overstepped its mandate in deliberating the status of Jerusalem and the so-called West Bank districts of Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley, among others. A deadly terror attack struck the main eastern highway near Azaim crossing, from which Israelis and Palestinians alike enter into Jerusalem. According to the police spokesperson's unit, 3 terrorists, residents of the city of Bethlehem, arrived in vehicles on Highway 1 from Ma'ale Adumim towards Jerusalem, exited their vehicles at 2 different locations, and began firing automatic M16 rifles and Carlo-style weapons towards civilians and vehicles stuck in traffic. Consequently, medical sources reported 1 fatality and 8 more injured civilians, with varying degrees of injuries that were evacuated for medical treatment.
סביב השעה 7:30 במהלך פעילות יזומה של צוותי תנועה ביחד עם צוותי תחנה וכוחות מג"ב שמענו כוחות ירי, הבנו שיש פה פיגוע. 3 מחבלים בשתי זירות שונות חוסלו בזירה, מספר פצועים פונו בסיוע של מחוז ירושלים שסגר את הציר ובסיוע כוחות תנועה שלנו ופונו לבתי חולים. מהר מאוד סגרנו את הזירה.
In other news, progress has reportedly been made in the U.S.-led negotiations between Israel and the Islamist Hamas via Qatari and Egyptian mediation on reaching a tangible outline for a hostage release deal. Making the announcement, Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz voiced cautious optimism, indicating initial signs to advance an outline.
יש ניסיונות בימים אלו לקדם מתווה חדש וסימנים ראשוניים שמעידים על אפשרות להתקדם. אנחנו לא נפסיק לחפש את הדרך ולא נפספס שום הזדמנות להחזיר את הבנות והבנים הביתה.
While further pledging to leave no stone unturned in the quest to see all hostages returned back home, Minister Gantz signaled the international community that failure to reach a deal would end hopes for any type of cessation of hostilities.
בזירת הלחימה אנו בפני פעולה ברפיח שתחל לאחר פינוי האוכלוסייה מהאזור. החשיבות של תיאור רפיח היא ביכולת לפגוע בכוחות חמאס הפועלים בה ובצורך לפרז את רצועת עזה. אני חוזר ואומר, אם לא יהיה מתווה חטופים, נפעל גם בזמן הרמדאן. מאז מתווה החטופים לא עצרנו את הלחימה אפילו ליום אחד, ולא נעצור אפילו לדקה, בלי שיוחזרו חטופינו. ובכל מצב, נמשיך להילחם בעוצמות הנדרשות עד שנסיר את האיום של חמאס.
The Israeli War Cabinet Minister went on to address a resolution that was overwhelmingly adopted in the Knesset, Hebrew for Parliament, which explicitly rejects any unilateral attempt to impose on Jerusalem a so-called two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
היום העברנו בכנסת החלטה ברוב גדול המתנגדת להכרזה חד-צדדית על מדינה פלסטינית. אחרי השבעה באוקטובר, זו תהיה טעות לתת רוח גבית כזו לטרור. הסדרים מדיניים צריכים להתקיים באופן ישיר, אחרת הם לא יהיו ברי קיימא. ובכל מצב עתידי, ישראל תשמר את עליונותה ויכולת הפעולה הביטחונית בכל רצועת עזה. המשימה שלנו היא 100% שליטה ביטחונית ו0% שליטה אזרחית. הרבה גורמים יכולים לפעול בשטח, רק לא חמאס.
As was mentioned by Minister Gantz, the Israeli parliament voted on the government's declaration, rejecting unilateral diktats vis-à-vis a so-called two-state solution.
חברי הכנסת, להלן תוצאות ההצבעה, 99 בעד, 9 מתנגדים. אני קובע שהודעת הממשלה התקבלה.
Addressing the plenum, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held the overwhelming support shown in the vote, highlighting Israel's unity in the face of any international attempts to bypass the fundamental right of parties to any dispute per the United Nations Charter to seek a solution by negotiation rather than predetermined international diktats.
The people of Israel and their elected representatives are united today as never before. The Knesset voted overwhelmingly to oppose any attempt to unilaterally impose a Palestinian state on Israel. Such an attempt will only endanger Israel and will prevent the genuine peace that we all seek. Peace can only be achieved after we achieve total victory over Hamas and through direct negotiations between the parties, direct negotiations without preconditions. Toda rabah.
While Netanyahu's evident victory in the face of recent international discourse over rising prospects of a two-state solution, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid, whose party voted in favor of the government's declaration, sought, however, to pour cold water over its essence, claiming that the Biden administration, which is known to favor Lapid over Netanyahu, had no hidden plans to advance a unilateral solution to the decades-old conflict.
אדוני ראש הממשלה, אני ומפלגתי הצבענו בעד ההצעה הזו, אבל כמו שאתה ואני יודעים היטב, לא באמת יש דבר כזה. הרי הקשרים, כמו שאתה יודע היטב, הקשרים שלי עם הממשל האמריקאי טובים בהרבה משלך, אז הלכתי ובדקתי מולם, אין דבר כזה. המצאת איום שאינו קיים.
חבר הכנסת שקלים.
על מה אנחנו מדברים? אין גורם רשמי אחד בעולם שמציע הכרה חד צדדית בפלסטינים. המצאת ספין כדי שלא ידברו על שלטי אתה אשם. כי אתה אשם, אתה הראש ואתה אשם. אין הצעה כזאת. לא, אין לי בעיה להצביע בעד. אנחנו נגד צעדים חד צדדיים, רק אין הצעה כזאת של אף גורם רשמי.
It is interesting to know that 12 Israeli legislators voted to block international attempts to impose a permanent solution to the conflict unilaterally. The International Court of Justice in The Hague continued to hold separate public hearings on the status of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley from a list of countries, the majority of which indicated clear bias, irrespective of the fundamental principles of international law. In contrast, the United States addressed a 15-judge panel, during the course of which it stressed that it challenges the court's jurisdiction over the matter, as was set in the founding principles during the establishment of the United Nations.
Under the established framework, any movement towards Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza requires consideration of Israel's very real security needs. We were all reminded of those security needs on October 7, and they persist. Regrettably, those needs have been ignored by many of the participants in asserting how the court should consider the questions before it. In sum, it is important that the court keep in mind the balance that the Security Council and General Assembly have determined is necessary to provide the best chance for durable peace.
During the course of making its arguments about the court's jurisdiction, the acting legal advisor of the U.S. State Department cited Secretary of State Antony Blinken, voicing the Biden administration's perceived urgency to realize a two-state solution, arguing that it indicates a political process that essentially renders a non-negotiated legal advisory by the top United Nations court in breach of the UN Charter.
A few days ago at the Munich Security Conference, Secretary Blinken emphasized that it is more urgent than ever to proceed to a Palestinian state, one that also ensures the security of Israel and makes the necessary commitments to do so. In light of these considerations, the court should not find that Israel is legally obligated to immediately and unconditionally withdraw from occupied territory. You have a difficult task before you. Others have asked you to broadly construe the questions and the law. They have asked you to try to resolve the whole of the dispute between the parties through an advisory opinion addressed to questions focusing on the acts of only one party. The United States disagrees with that this approach would be consistent with the court's role within the United Nations or the established UN framework for achieving peace through negotiations.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Authority's Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki, seemingly failing to understand the legal arguments of the U.S. team, sought to ridicule the case made by the United States versus the International Court of Justice's mandate in casting a non-binary advisory that could only further impede Ramallah's aspired outcome. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. Tomorrow evening, TV7 Israel will not air our daily news supplement. Nevertheless, we will broadcast all of our other programs per usual. Separately, it is important for us to mention that TV7 Israel is a donation-based non-profit ministry with all of our productions available free of charge. Therefore, if you're blessed by our daily updates and would like to help us bear the costs, we would appreciate it if you would support TV7 with a donation. You can do so by visiting our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Last, but certainly not least, I would like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. Jonathan Hessen wishing you a Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our upcoming TV7 Israel updates. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.